Smith. He's the director of the Norman Smith Environmental Education Center, which is right by Blue Hills. He's also director of the Blue Hills Trailside Museum. It's a real pleasure always to bring someone in to our own learning area and for them to tell us about what they do. I think you'll find that Mr. Smith's got a lot of awesome, unique things to tell us. Not oftentimes we have a true wildlife biologist come on in and show us what they know, but I think you'll find that Mr. Smith is full of that. And if you give him a warm welcome.
Thanks. Well, this afternoon we're going to actually talk about snowy owls, some of the research work that I actually have been doing for the past 35 years. And I wanted to give you a little idea on how I get started. Well, back in 1966, I sent a letter to the Blue Hills Trailside Museum and asked if they needed any volunteers. That's me in the middle, right there. In 1967, I was actually hired to work part-time there, and that's my first experience with the Peregrine Falcon. And by having a job and getting a job, I was able to then purchase my first car, 1957 Chevy. And after I purchased that car, I had 6 or 7 different engines in it. This was my favorite. It was a 454 with over 750 horsepower that I used to race at New England Dragway. As I got a little older, I bought a 1934 Ford Coupe and built that car as well. And then here we are 50 years later. Again, that's me in the middle. So when I was young at the museum, when I first started, we got lots of baby hawks and owls that people used to bring into us. And we used to hand raise these babies, put them in a big flight cage. We'd release these birds and say, wow, what a great job we did, until we put bands on the birds and realized that most of these birds didn't survive. We wanted to find out why they didn't survive, and the reason they didn't survive was because of what's called imprinting. A baby bird imprints on what it feeds, and it gets fed by a mother, which the bird imprints on. So if a person feeds a baby bird, the baby bird imprints on a person, which is a problem when you let it go. So we tried puppets and used puppets to feed the babies, and that didn't seem to help. So we used captive birds that we had in captivity to feed these little babies, and again we released them, and that didn't work. So one thing we did is try to find out why we were getting these little baby hawks and owls to begin with. And in most cases, they were blown out of a nest or blown out of a tree, and the nest came down. So we said, why don't we go out and see if we can actually rebuild one of these nests and put the little babies back in there. And of course, the old wives' tale is that if you touch a baby bird, the parents will never come back. Well, we found that that isn't true. We went out and we actually rebuilt some of these little nests. It takes about 8 to 10 hours to collect enough sticks, get up in the tree, put them all together, and put the little babies in, and mom and dad come back, and it was a great experience. However, my 2 assistants that helped out on the project, one said one day, instead of collecting all those sticks and putting them up in that tree and spending all day, why don't we just take that bloody basket we put the sticks in, tie it to the tree, and be done with it? So we did that, put a little baby great horned owl in, came back later that afternoon, and lo and behold, mom came in and was in that nest, and she could have cared less what that nest looked like. We had some true orphans, babies that had no parents. The parents were killed for one reason or another, and we said, well, what do we do with these little babies? If we hand raise them, we know they won't be able to survive in the wild, so what could we do? We talked to the experts and said, how about we take this little baby and put it in a nest with other baby owls and let them raise it? And the experts said, you can't do that. Owls are voracious predators. You put that little baby in there and the owl will kill it. Well, after a number of years went by, we went out to a nest, found 2 little baby barred owls, took that 3rd baby barred owl, put it in the nest, and immediately mom flew in, landed on that tree, and we were wondering if she was going to kill that little baby. She reached over, picked up a little rabbit leg in the nest, fed that baby, chirped at it, and said, where have you been all this time? And at that point, we knew that owls couldn't count, and that they couldn't tell their babies apart, and that this certainly would work. We've also tried to stimulate people, especially kids when they're young, to build nest boxes and nest locations for different bird species. And if you can see the pride involved when you build a nest box, you actually put it out there and you get a resident that takes over, and you get a chance to see those little babies leave that nest from the box that you actually built. In 1982, I was involved in the bald eagle recovery project in Massachusetts. The last nesting bald eagles in the state was in 1905 in Sandwich, Mass. We went up to Canada and took bald eagles out of nests, 1 chick out of each nest, brought them down to Quabbin Reservoir, put them in the hack box, released them from the hack box, and 4 years later they came back and bred on Mount Rushmore at Quabbin Reservoir. This is the first eagle nest in Massachusetts since 1906. And that's the first baby that was born in Massachusetts. Peregrine falcons, another endangered species. These birds had declined dramatically, so there were no peregrine falcons east of the Mississippi River by 1959. So we took little baby peregrine falcons, we put them in traditional nest locations in Massachusetts, and great horned owls came in at night and killed them and ate them. So he said, how do we get these baby peregrines back in the wild? We took them into downtown Boston where there are no great horned owls, put them on top of the post office building, put them in a little hack box, released them, and sure enough, the following year, they came back and nested in the Customs House Tower, producing the first baby peregrines since 1950. Peregrine falcons nest in a variety of locations. This was in Quincy, the General Dynamics shipyard. The peregrines actually nested on that little jib crane on top of this big crane here, which was called the Goliath crane, which at the time was the largest crane in the world. And this is what Mom looks like, sitting on a little nest on top of that little jib crane. And this is a picture of Dad giving you an eye-to-eye look at a peregrine falcon before he comes in and attacks you. This is a bird that actually took up residency at Fenway Park and nested in a press box. And it was after Big Poppy was attacked by this red tail during batting practice that the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife decided this bird had to go. We went into Fenway, captured this red-tailed hawk, put a band on it, brought it out to the Massachusetts-New York border, and released her. 2 days later, I got a call from the groundskeeper at Fenway Park saying, guess what? There's a bird sitting on the light stanchion pole with a bright, shiny band. She's back. Well, she decided to nest in a tree outside Fenway and hasn't been a problem since. In 1981, we decided we wanted to learn more about hawks. So we decided to go to the Blue Hills Reservation, find a hilltop location, 5 miles from downtown Boston, to build a hawk banding station. The first thing we needed to do was clear some brush off the top of the hill, find an experienced carpenter to build a blind on top of that hill, find some cheap labor to dig lots of poles up there to put in our mist net poles and lure poles. And before you knew it, we were ready to go. We had our lure birds out, we had our mist nets out, and we were ready to catch hawks. The next thing we needed was a skilled, keen-eyed observer to look for those hawks at a distance and to see whether or not they would be interested in coming to our hawk banding station. And sure enough, this is what it looks like to sit in the blind and have a red-tailed hawk flying towards you at about 60 miles an hour. The hawks come in, they get caught in a bow net. Once they get captured in the net, they're actually taken out and they're placed in a can. So here we have canned hawk. And you can imagine if we said to this red-tailed hawk, gee, do you think you could sit on the scale for a second so we can get you weight? The bird would fly away. So we place him in the can, weigh the bird with the can, and then we have to use our mathematical skills because we have to subtract the weight of the can from the weight of the bird so we know what that bird really weighs. And then a U.S. Fish and Wildlife band is placed on each leg of the bird. And this band has an individual number. It's almost like your social security number. It lives with this bird for the rest of its life, so we can hopefully find out some data about where these birds go, how long they live, and where they migrate to. We did capture some birds, red-tailed hawks, and one of the things that was really interesting is that we noticed that young red-tailed hawks don't have a red tail. So they're very difficult to identify. It's not until they become an adult bird that they get that red tail. This is a Cooper's hawk, a bird that was threatened in Massachusetts that is coming back in bigger numbers. And this is a bird that we actually captured as a young bird, a bird that was born that year. And this is the same bird that we caught 3 years later. You can see how that bird changed, both the eye color, the plumage as well. This is our first peregrine falcon that we captured at our hawk banding station. You can see this bird has bands on it. This is a bird that was actually hacked out the year before from downtown Boston. One thing we found with our hawk banding station is that there's a great variety in different species. Peregrine falcons, for instance. Out of all the peregrine falcons we've captured at Chickatawba Hill, this is the smallest bird. This bird weighed 512 grams. It weighed 1,265 grams. This is a bird we caught in 1995. This is a gyrfalcon. This is actually the rarest falcon in the world, and this is the first one that was ever banded or captured in New England. And in 1998, we captured this bird at our hawk banding station. This is a golden eagle. This bird stood 2.5 feet tall with a 12-foot wingspan. Before too long, my two assistants decided they wanted to have their own blind. They wanted to build a blind on the south side of the hill. And I said, why would you want to build a blind on the south side of the hill? When birds migrate, they migrate from north to south. My blind is on the north side of the hill, and I'm going to be catching all the birds before they get to you. Well, they built a blind on the south side of the hill anyways, and on many days they caught twice as many birds as me on the south side of the hill as I did on the north side of the hill. And now we know that birds like red-tailed hawks actually migrate north before they turn around and head south. We learned a lot about hawks at our hawk banding station, a lot about identification skills, a lot about different adaptations of each one of the hawks that comes through. And at the end of the day, when these diurnal raptors, the hawks, go to sleep, that's when the other group of raptors, the owls, take over. Now, owls can be much more difficult to study than hawks can, because owls are nocturnal and they come out at night and are very difficult to see. We started a project in 1981 to study snowy owls at Logan Airport. Snowy owls are a bird that comes from the Arctic tundra, and a lot of literature has been written on snowy owls. The historic literature says snowy owls come from the Arctic. They come to New England because there's no food up north. These birds starve to death, and they never make it back north. They're not viable breeders. So we started capturing these birds, and we found that these birds usually show up about the first week of November. The earliest is October 22nd. They usually stay until the last week of May, occasionally June, and this bird stayed till July 7th, which was the latest record for Massachusetts, until the summer of 2013, when we had 2 snowy owls that stayed here year-round, the first time ever. The number of snowy owls that comes each year varies dramatically, from a low count of 1 snowy owl back in 1981 to a high count of 120 snowy owls during the winter of 2013 and 14. And even birds that are all white, like snowy owls, can be very difficult to see during the daytime. There's actually 9 snowy owls in this slide. Now, the FAA in Massport has taken great pains at the airport to bird-proof their equipment. They don't want birds sitting on these sensitive antenna devices because the birds' droppings are very acidic and would corrode those devices. So you can see how they've placed all these little metal spines all over that antenna to deter birds from sitting on it, and you can see how that deters snowy owls. They also take other methods as well, like these plastic owls, and place them around the airfield, again to keep birds from perching on different locations. And if you look really carefully at that snowy owl, you can see all the whitewash on that great horned owl's head, so you know what that snowy owl thinks of that great horned owl. Snowy owls have incredible vision, not only during the daytime, but at night as well. They can perhaps see better than 20 times better than we can at night, and at least 10 times better than we can during the day. They also have incredible hearing. They have perhaps the best hearing of any creatures on Earth. And here's a bird that's sitting on the edge of an active runway. How can they possibly stand all those jet noises and have really sensitive ears? They have special feathers, as we found out over the years, that can actually muffle sounds going in or become stiff and abrasive and turn into an amplifier to amplify sounds as well. When you look at the field guides, snowy owls are listed as a tuftless owl. In other words, snowy owls do not have ear tufts. However, every one of the 852 snowy owls that we've captured has ear tufts. It's just that they rarely keep them erect. When you look at the age groups of snowy owls, the females are larger than the males are, and the largest and darkest of the snowy owls are usually the young females. And here we have a young female with a young female. The birds that are a little smaller generally have a white bib and a more rounded head than a flat top head are usually the young males. And here we have a young male with a young male. Now in this slide you'll see a young female with a young female and a young male with a young male. And in both cases the females are larger and more aggressive than the males are. And the whitest of the snowy owls are the adult males. Out of all the snowy owls we captured at Logan, this is the only bird that was immaculately white. And the birds that are large and very aggressive, oftentimes attacking other owls, are usually the adult females. So when you see the 2 owls together, you can tell the male from the female. The bird on the left is actually the male snowy owl. The bird on the right is the female. The females are larger, more aggressive, and definitely the boss. How do you tell females from male snowy owls? Well, you open up the wing, and when you look at the wing, you look at the bottom of the feathers. If it has a bar that goes across the feather, completely across the feather, it's a female. If it has a spot on the feather that doesn't go completely across, it's actually a male. So what do we have here? The bird on the right's a male, the bird on the left's a female. No, there's a bar that goes between the feathers on the outside of the wing on both of these birds. These are both young female snowy owls. So you can see how difficult it is to tell them apart. Even the experts get confused. If you look at these two snowy owls, they look virtually identical in plumage until you turn them around and look at them from the back. The bird on the left is an adult female snowy owl, and the bird on the right is a young male snowy owl. But if these two birds were perched out in a marsh someplace, I think it would be a real challenge for anyone, including myself, to be able to tell them apart. Why do snowy owls come here? Well, the historic literature says they come because there's no food. However, our research work over the past 35 years has shown it's the total opposite. This is a lemming. This is a mouse-like creature that lives in the Arctic, and this is what snowy owls primarily eat. In years when there's lots of lemmings, snowy owls breed and have lots of babies. This is a picture from northern Quebec in the Algonquin Peninsula in 2013. During that summer, there was more lemmings than there have ever been recorded in the Arctic. In this one snowy owl nest, there's 78 uneaten lemmings. So that year there was a lot of breeding, a lot of baby snowy owls, and more snowy owls that traveled further south. Where did the first snowy owl show up in Massachusetts? In this pristine habitat in East Boston, Mass. This woman actually had 3 different snowy owls in her backyard during that winter. Here's one that showed up in South Station, downtown Boston. The Boston police were nice enough to put out a couple of traffic cones, and this bird stayed there and slept during the day, and when nighttime came, the bird woke up and continued to journey south. What do they eat? They eat primarily a lot of small rodents, mice, rats. They'll take animals as big as a muskrat. Apparently this particular muskrat did not want his photograph taken. As you can see, while we were photographing this muskrat, he grabbed onto my boot with his teeth. He probably had too many jet fumes that day. They eat a lot of waterfowl as well, a lot of different duck species. This is a red-breasted merganser. This is a little pool of black ducks and a snowy owl perched on that tree. And what was really interesting is every single day this snowy owl would land on that tree, stretch its right wing, its left leg, its right leg, its left leg, and it would look down on this little pool of black ducks, and every day it would pick out one of those ducks that was going to be its next meal. And what amazed me was those black ducks never learned that when that snowy owl was on the tree, one of those black ducks was going to be its next meal. And it wasn't until you see the snowy owl on the center of this slide flying off with the last black duck from that pool that owl went elsewhere to hunt. Those black ducks never got the message that they were going to be prey for that snowy owl. They eat other species as well, other raptors, including American kestrel, northern harrier. This is a short-eared owl. This is a Canada goose that probably weighs 4 times what that owl weighs. This is a great blue heron, which is the largest bird in Massachusetts. They stand about 4 feet tall. Again, no match for a snowy owl. The only bird that really gets away with harassing snowy owls are peregrine falcons. When people are asked what's the fastest animal in the world, most people think it's a cheetah. Cheetahs can travel up to 70 miles an hour for a short distance of time, but the fastest animal in the world is a peregrine falcon. They've been documented exceeding speeds of 242 miles an hour. So here we have a peregrine that's diving on this snowy owl. Now, a number of years later, I was out at the airport and I was watching a peregrine falcon. It came in and it hit a snowy owl off the back of the head. Woke up this snowy owl that was actually sleeping. And that peregrine falcon went in, flew into a flock of starlings, and grabbed one of those starlings, a little blackbird, and flew down to the ground with it. It didn't realize right on its tail was that snowy owl. That snowy owl came in and grabbed that peregrine falcon and had him for dinner. So, in the world, peregrine falcon, you need to be aware of your surroundings. Otherwise, these voracious predators could have you as their next meal. The interesting component of this story is that that starling got to tell his buddies how this snowy owl saved his life. Snowy owls eat a lot of gulls as well. Ring-billed gulls, herring gulls, blackback gulls, and we assumed that the snowy owl was eating a gull until we got a little closer. And in fact, it wasn't eating a gull at all. It was eating another snowy owl. Snowy owls have very large mouths like all other owl species. They have a big head because they have big eyes and a big mouth. They're not wise and intelligent like people think. And when they catch their food, like a rat, they actually grab onto it from the head, open their mouth, down it goes, and the only thing remaining is a little tail sticking out. They digest all the digestible portions, all the fur and bones get compressed together in a fur ball called a pellet, and once a day they spit up those pellets. If you collect those pellets, you can take them apart and tell what owls eat. So the literature again says that all you have to do is collect the pellets, take them apart, and you'll know what snowy owls eat. However, we found that if you dissect the pellets of snowy owls, they eat about 99% small rodents. However, if you watch snowy owls hunt, they collect and catch a lot of bird species. So what happens is when they catch a bird like a duck, they pluck the feathers off the breast, they eat the breast meat, there is no roughage to show up in the pellet. So again, the literature is wrong. You can't just collect pellets, you need to do observations to know what snowy owls really eat. As you can see, my two assistants love to collect pellets, and these two guys have collected over 6,000 snowy owl pellets at Logan Airport, the largest sampling that's ever been collected. And for collecting all those pellets for me, I give these guys free room and board. Snowy owls, like the hawks, the hawk banding station, we capture them, place them in a can to get a weight of the bird. Once we get a weight, we get some measurements, tail measurements, wing measurements, collect blood samples from them, put on a U.S. Fish and Wildlife ban, and then release the birds. Now, in an average winter, we catch 8 to 10 snowy owls. So we've had one year, we caught one snowy owl. The best year ever was the winter of 2013-14, when we caught 121 snowy owls. Again, why were there so many snowy owls around? Because it was a banning year for lemmings in the Arctic, producing lots of owls, and more owls travel further south. And during that winter, my granddaughter Camilla said, "Grandpa, can I go with you to release a snowy owl like Mommy used to do when she was a little girl?" And I said, "Okay, Camilla, we're going to go down to Duxbury Beach." Now remember, this snowy owl has a 6-foot wingspan. It has 200 pounds of gripping pressure in each one of its toes. So when you open that box up, make sure you jump back. I know. She opens up the cover of the box and she puts her little hand over the top of the box. And she says, "Hi, Mr. Snowy Owl, my name is Camilla. And I know my grandpa caught you out at Logan Airport and took you away from your vacation. And my grandpa told me that you come from the North Pole up where Santa Claus lives. I hope you have a safe journey and a safe trip while you're down here." And when she finished that, the owls flew away. We knew owls had returned to the airport a year later, 3, 5, 7, 10, and one bird 16 years later. But we couldn't prove that those birds went back to the Arctic. Again, the historic literature says that these birds, when they come down here, they come down, they die of emaciation, they never make it back north, and are not viable breeders. So, in 1999, we decided to put satellite transmitters on snowy owls and track them. This was the first time this was ever done with any owl species. So we put little transmitters on the back of the owls, released the owls, and sure enough, we tracked these birds, and lo and behold, they made it back to the Arctic. So again, we proved for the first time that snowy owls do make it back to the Arctic, and that they are viable breeders. This is one of the snowy owls we put a PTT transmitter on. This is a bird that we let go at Plum Island. And as you can see, you can follow the map. We let this bird go in March. The bird went all the way up to Nunavut, up above the Arctic Circle. And in November 24th, this bird returned to Logan Airport. In 9 months, that owl traveled 7,426 miles. In 2013-14, we decided to create a new group called Project Snowstorm, a group of collaborators along the Atlantic coast to put more research in studying snowy owls. And we used a new type of transmitter, a GSM transmitter, a transmitter that's solar powered and transmits to a cell phone tower. And the advantage of these transmitters is it tells you real time what the owl is. So we took this data and put it on our website, and what we didn't realize is that photographers were going to go to the website, find out exactly where the owl was, hunt it down, and try to take photographs of it. And so the owl couldn't find any place to roost to get away from these people. So we had to go to the website and put a 3-day delay on it for the safety of the owl, something I didn't expect when we thought we had this great data for people to look at. This is a snowy owl that we captured at Logan Airport in 2013 and recaptured the bird in 2015 and decided to put a GSM transmitter on it. We brought the bird up to Plum Island, let the bird go. The bird was at Plum Island for about 2 weeks. It went over to Salisbury Beach, came back to Logan Airport, and every night the bird would leave the airport because there was a dominant snowy owl that wouldn't let this bird hunt there. Because it had a GSM transmitter, we could track and see where this owl went. Every single night, this owl would go to downtown Boston, to Chinatown, and sit on the stack of this truck every single night to catch rats that were coming out of the back of that Chinese restaurant. 2 years ago, we captured a snowy owl that had a band on its leg. And it was a bird that we sent the band into the bird banding lab because it was a band I didn't recognize. The band number came back that this was a bird that was banded by a guy named Mike Olmsted 23 years ago. Now, Mike Olmsted was the master permitter who I started working under a long time ago, and I banded this bird 23 years ago. We thought snowy owls lived to be 10 to 12 years old. That's what the literature said. This one obviously was in great shape at 23 years old. So how long do snowy owls live? We have no idea. In 2014, we had all the researchers from around the world that researched snowy owls from the International Snowy Owl Working Group come to the Norman Smith Environmental Education Center for a conference to talk about snowy owls and study snowy owls. The American Birding Association had done some research work on snowy owls and said that there was about 300,000 snowy owls worldwide. How did they do their data? They went to the Arctic. They found that snowy owls need 5.3 hectares of space for their nest. They divided the Arctic tundra by 5.3 hectares, and they hence found how many snowy owls there were. They never counted nests. So we got the researchers together, actually counted the nest of snowy owls, and found that, in fact, it was far less than they anticipated. The International Union for Conservation changed the status of snowy owls to vulnerable. The global population size, which was estimated to be 200,000 individuals, is more like around 14,000 pairs. If they continue to decline, which they are, they will be endangered in the future. This is one of my assistants. This is my son Josh, and this is the snowy owl, and he helped rehabilitate. This bird had a broken wing and flew into a barbed wire fence. It took 8 weeks for this bird to recover. The bird recovered. He brought it to Duxbury Beach, and unfortunately, 2 years later, we had a band return from Canada. This bird was shot and killed. This is Josh when he was 3 years old, handling one of his first snowy owls out of Logan Airport. And we were out at the airport a number of years later, and there was a snowy owl out there, a very white bird. And after a couple of attempts, we actually captured that white bird. And we realized after we captured it, the bird had a band on its leg. And this bird is the same exact bird you see in both photographs 10 years later. So you can see how that snowy owl and my assistant changed during that 10-year time frame. And this is Josh in 2013-14, still helping out with the Snowy Owl Project. This is my other assistant. This is my daughter, Danielle, and this was her first experience with a snowy owl. When she was a freshman in high school, she had to do a 4-year science project for her biology class. And she said, "Dad, I want to do a project on raptors. Can you help me pick a project to do?" I said, "You should do a project on American kestrels, a little falcon. You've been involved with these since you were 2 years old. We got a lot of data. These birds are declining dramatically and haven't bred in Massachusetts for the past 9 years. It would make a great project." And she thought about it for a week or so and said, "You know, I really don't want to do anything on American kestrels. It's a very sad story. These birds are declining." I said, "Okay, why don't you do a project on ospreys? Here's a bird that declined from TBT and PCBs, and this bird was down to only 2 nesting pairs in Massachusetts. On Martha's Vineyard alone, 2 years ago, there was 128 nesting pairs. This is a good news story. It would make a great project." And she thought about that for about a week or so and said, "I really don't want to do anything on ospreys." She came back a week later and said, "I know what I'm going to do my project on." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I'm going to do it on migrating owls." Now, since she's been involved with snowy owls since she was 2 years old, I assumed it was going to be snowy owls. And I said, "You know, snowy owls are not a migrating owl species. They're nomadic. They move because of food. Big breeding year means there's going to be a lot of snowy owls." And she says, "Oh, I wasn't going to do it on snowy owls." I directed there. And she sent him a letter and said, "I'd like to catch saw-whet owls at the Daniel Webster site." And David Clapp wrote back and said, "Dear Danielle, you need to know 3 things. First of all, saw-whet owls are rare and elusive in Massachusetts, number 1. Read the literature. Number 2, saw-whet owls are a woodland owl. They live in hemlock groves and pine groves. We have 800 acres of wide open fields here. And number 3, this place has been well birded for over 100 years and no one has ever seen or heard a saw-whet owl." was being as persistent as she always has been. She says, we're going to try this and see if it works. So I became her assistant. We set up some mist nets in the field. She made a tape of a saw-whet owl call. They make a little toot sound. And when the sun went down, she turned on that tape. We were sitting out in the vehicle with David Clapp that night, and he said, you know, Danielle, even if there were saw-whet owls here, they would never venture across a wide open field on a full moon night like tonight, because the resident great horned owls that live here would eat them. If that was me, I would have packed everything up and left and said, you're absolutely right. But she said, no, we'll stay the night to see what happens. We went out and checked the mist net. An hour later, there was nothing in the net. She said, well, we're going to stay the night to see what happens. Sure enough, the second check of the net produced a saw-whet owl. The first saw-whet owl that had been seen or heard at this site. She caught 7 saw-whet owls the first year. She caught 47 saw-whet owls the second year, 17 in one night. She also captured a long-eared owl that had never been seen there as well. She never did capture the screech owl. Every night this little screech owl would come in and land on the speaker and stick his head inside that speaker and try to figure out where that saw-whet owl was. The 4th year of her project was her best year ever. She caught 407 saw-whet owls, 49 in one night. And she said, you know, I think we should try to catch saw-whet owls in our backyard. Well, we live in Whitman, Mass. And as you can see, there aren't any woods around anywhere. It's house after house after house. And there's just enough room in the backyard between the back pool and the back fence to put up a 40-foot mist net. So we placed the mist net up there, put the little tape player out there. The sun went down, and we turned on the tape player. Well, immediately my neighbor from next door, whose house is 14 feet from my house, came out on their porch. Her husband came out right after her, and she said, what the heck is that noise? And he listened for a second, and he said, oh, that's that nut job next door that works for Audubon. That's some kind of a bird call. And they went back in the house, so we knew we'd be able to try this and see if it worked. And sure enough, we caught 32 saw-whet owls and 2 screech owls in our own backyard. Now, the advantage of doing it at home is that you have nice lighting, you have a refrigerator if you want to get a snack, you have good bathroom facilities. And as you can see, if you take a screech owl like this one here and you turn him on his back, they fall asleep. He weighs 208 grams. So he said, let's try that with saw-whet owls. Well, saw-whet owls do not fall asleep when you put them on their back. They immediately wake up and look for a good place to roost. Because of this project, we now know that saw-whet owls are the most abundant owl species we have in Massachusetts in the fall and winter. When she started this project, she was the first one to ban saw-whet owls in New England. She's banned over 3,900 saw-whet owls. Has the longest ban recovery of a saw-whet owl, a bird that was originally banned in northern Montana that she caught the following year. In Massachusetts now, there's 14 sites catching saw-whet owls, and in North America, there's 129 sites catching 12,000 saw-whet owls. This is one of my newest assistants. This is my granddaughter, Camilla, and this is one of her first experiences with a little baby great horned owl. And when she got a little older, she said, Grandpa, can I go with you when you put this little baby in a nest? And as you can see, Camilla really likes to talk to these owls. And as you can see, she likes to talk to these owls. And this one, she's saying, this little owl, I'm feeling really bad because I know you lost your mom and dad and your brothers and sisters, but today's going to be a good day for you because you're going to have a new mom and a new dad and go back into the nest. And this is one of my newest assistants. Here's Alexa on the left-hand side, banding saw-whet owls. And this is Gabby and Jack, again, my grandchildren. Now, whether you're in Barrow, Alaska, or Logan Airport, or even in your own backyard, there are many environmental issues that need to be addressed. And the best way to address these issues is through educational programming and getting people to understand and get stimulated by these birds we capture. Learning can begin at any age. This is Danielle with her first Sharpshin hawk. And teaching can begin at any age as well. This is Josh handling his first snowy owl. And this is Camilla showing her sister Alexa how to release her first snowy owl. Now, I haven't learned a lot about raptors since we started this project. I realize that a lot of the literature that we read about is not true. We need to have more researchers learn about it. I have learned a lot about my assistants and how important it is to include kids in research projects. I feel fortunate to have a third generation of owl researchers that can continue this snowy owl research well into the future. And I realize now more than ever how important it is for every person in this room to follow their dreams and passions and take the knowledge that you gain, no matter how little it is, and share it with everyone you encounter. And together we can better understand and appreciate and care for this world in which we live. Anybody have any questions? All right, we covered everything.